Hello, hello. Today I have with me Jennifer Spor, and Jennifer joins me today to talk about the time in her life when her mom was in the hospital from terminal cancer and her corporate world disrupted that sacred time. She vowed in that moment that she would create a life on her terms, and she did. Jennifer is a spiritual mentor and a host of Path of the Awakened Heart podcast. Jennifer, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for the warm welcome. I'm excited to be here and to connect with you and your
Well,
listeners.
I love it. And on the show, we don't stay on the surface, we just dive right in.
Yep.
So dive right into that messy and challenging time that you're at your with your mom, terminal cancer, and the corporate world was
Yeah.
all over you.
Yes. So I would say that season in my life was the first major catalyst or, you know, a major kind of spiritual awakening, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to start with sharing that story to say that there were some rumblings, happening
Sure.
before that, before my mom was
Sure.
diagnosed with that terminal illness. Essentially, I had a really successful career in the retail industry, worked in that industry for like 23 or 24 years. And toward the end
Wow.
of my career, I had worked my way all the way up the ladder, was in this corporate position, right? So for many of us are taught to believe that, there are certain boxes that we need to check off the list to achieve societal success, right? And so basically I had got to the point where I checked off all those boxes. And the thing I also want to mention is that even before I was intentionally focused on my ascension and my spiritual journey, I have always been someone who has had to live in integrity, right? To believe
Mm.
in whatever career, job, whatever it is that I would choose to pursue. So I did love that work for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And in retrospect, I would tell people that I was dating my purpose in that career and not married to it, right? And it's because I just love working with people so much. And that's, I think, what kept me there for so long. So, anyway, the fog started to lift when I had checked all those boxes off the list because I wasn't feeling challenged anymore. I also wasn't feeling like I was really making a difference. So my work just wasn't lighting me up as much anymore. And so I started to really wonder what was next, which instilled a lot of fear because uh,
Mm.
especially I'm Gen X, our generation, we're taught that, get the one job, keep the job, follow life
Yes.
in like this chronological kind of order. So
Check all the boxes,
I,
like you said.
yes, so I was scared and, I did not leave my career at the time. What I did do immediately, though, was embarked on this journey of discovering myself. And note that I don't really say rediscovery because what I realized through that time is that I really didn't know myself that well, like
Mm.
I knew I was a good person and I seek to live in integrity and all of that. But what I realized is I was on in my work all the time because of the role that I was in and all the responsibility I had. And even outside of my work, I most of the time just kind of went with the flow with whatever my friends and family, whatever everyone else wanted to do, which was great sometimes too, But I found myself really starting to reflect on, like, who am I? Like, who is Jennifer? Because every minute of my day, every day was filled up with something else. And so
Mm.
I embarked on this journey of really tapping into my natural intuitive gifts, which I've always been a very sensitive being. And then, another year or year and a half probably went by, and I'm on this journey of discovery, right? Awakening. And then my mother at the time was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And at the
Mm.
time, I was living on the East Coast, and she was living in Idaho, which is where I now live. But I was trying to juggle all the responsibility I already had in my life with flying back and forth, trying to be present with her and with my family. There was this one moment that I remember as if it were yesterday. I was in Idaho sitting at her bedside, and my phone from my work started blowing up, And for about probably the millionth time, the universe, God was giving me another opportunity to choose. And you got to have a sense of humor about this kind of stuff because it's just like sometimes God has to show us so many freaking times the same
Yes.
thing over and over again until we choose differently, right? That's kind of how
Hmm.
it goes. So I found myself very present in that moment, looking at my phone and looking at my mom. And this was just a couple days probably before she transitioned. It was really close.
Mm.
And it was like a light switch flipped on. All of a sudden, my courage exceeded my fear. I like had this epiphany and I said to myself, you know what? I'm not stuck. I'm taking my power back and I have no clue what I'm going to do, but I'm doing it and that's it. And I made a decision, right? And
Wow.
what ended up happening was my mom, transitions a few days after that. And at the time, remote work culture wasn't a thing. And to be quite honest with you, I didn't know at the time that, leaving my career was the solution to the problem I was perceiving that I had, right? Where I wasn't
Yeah.
happy. I didn't
Yeah.
even know really that that was it. And so, but what happened is I went back east and I did decide that I wanted to move physically closer to where my remaining family was after my mom passed. So what ended up happening is I voluntarily stepped down from my role because at the time they were like, we want you to stay, but you need to live here in order to have the
Yeah.
position. And so I chose my family. And a lot like the lyrics of a country song, which I love to say when I share this story, because again, you have to have a sense of humor. I literally rented my house out in New Jersey, packed up my car, and headed out west, drove across the country, came back. And I was consulting for a little bit of time for the current company that I had been working for, basically just tying up loose ends on projects where I had been
Hmm.
a stakeholder before. And it was really during that time that because I was experiencing this tremendous spiritual awakening, right? This shift in consciousness, I had invested in receiving the support of therapists, psychics, healers, other coaches, so many other people who were all amazing in their own right. What I couldn't find at the time, though, was someone who could actually relate to everything I was experiencing and
Mm.
support me in integrating who I was becoming into my day-to-day life, right? How to navigate all of that. And that was when I realized I'm the person that I was looking for. That's when I realized, you know what? I don't need a different job. I need to start a whole new path and I need to pave this path, you know? And that's how I started the work that I'm doing today. And I've been doing it full time. This year will be 9 years. So
Wow.
yeah, and let me tell you, when you decide to pursue your own path, um, especially as an entrepreneur, it is one of the greatest ways to really test your resolve, and all of our stuff tends to come up. So, um,
Yes, it
it,
does.
it's really fascinating, because of course, again, looking at me from a traditional societal kind of standpoint, you'd probably think, oh, she's this high level leader and this, I oversaw over 1,200 stores operations and all this stuff, right? But when I started my coaching practice, which is what I was doing at the time. And the intuitive work came in a little bit after that as well. But when I first started, I was actually absolutely terrified to be seen, like to start doing videos online because I intentionally wanted a virtual business because I love traveling and I liked the idea of being able to work from anywhere, right? And
Hmm.
give
Hmm.
service. So yeah, so it has been an interesting journey. One thing I will say, and then I really want everyone listening to take away as well, because a lot of people who decide to start their own business, even in the name of the business as a vehicle for fulfilling your mission, right? Give up like within the first year because it's not easy. And what I did at the very beginning, I made a commitment. I made a vow actually to myself that no matter what happened, that this was the path. Like this was the only path. This
Mm,
was the reason why I'm here. Right. So there wasn't a hoping, there was a knowing.
yeah.
And of course, there have been lots of spirals and ups and downs. Throw in a few dark nights of the soul here and there, again, like I laugh about it, but you got it. You've got to have a sense of humor
Yes.
about these
Yes.
very difficult things that we experience on this ascension journey. But I made a commitment at the beginning, that this was it, and I'm dedicated for life. It's like in personal development and spiritual communities, we talk about a lot about the importance of having foundational practices and rituals for ourselves to keep ourselves centered. And all of that is true, right? I teach that too. But there is a space in your journey where you move beyond that into your
Hmm.
day to day, your moment to moment living, that it's in your being,
Yep.
right? That
Yep.
there is no other way.
Yeah. Very much so.
That's the depth of devotion. That's the depth of devotion that we're all being called to now, because chances are most of your listeners are probably called to their own version, right? Of a unique path that they're here to create, because we're all here to contribute
Yes.
to a higher consciousness way of being and living on this planet. So there is no playbook. There's
Right.
you.
Right. It
And
is finding your way, following your
yes.
path, finding
Yeah.
your path, following the nudges, the breadcrumbs, whatever you want to call it.
It's
That
getting
is
really
the journey.
anchored and embodied in your truth, in the truth of
Yes.
who you are. And truth is not a belief, it's a knowing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Jennifer, what would you say is your biggest lesson in this ascension journey? 9 years,
I
10
I laugh.
years.
It's like oh, it's been like 15 years at this point.
Okay.
But it's been 9 years since I've been in my own business, but the biggest, I mean, there's a lot of them actually, but what initially came forward when you asked me that question is trust. Because the thing is that we've lived in this society, right, where from birth in this current human life, we've been programmed to believe that we need to navigate our journey here only with the human mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the human mind is great. It's amazing. It's fascinating. It serves an amazing purpose for us. But we often tend to default to treating it as the star of the show when really it
Mm-hmm.
needs to be in more of a supporting role, right? Because the human mind, when it comes to decision making, only takes into account our environmental conditioning and our past experiences, right? That's why so many people get stuck in the past and in
Right.
patterns,
Right.
right? Because
Yep.
they're operating from the human mind, from that space. Now, our intuition, our soul's guidance, your highest self, however you like to refer to it, has the big picture. The
Right.
reality, the truth is that we're this eternal being, right? And so our soul-led guidance is always going to guide us toward expansion. And sometimes this goes back to my bringing up trust, right? Sometimes that guidance can instill fear in us, only
Mm-hmm.
because the ego mind is its job is to question, right? And to challenge the status quo.
Or protect you.
Exactly. But
Yes.
yes, if we were being chased by a bear or something, like we need to listen to that. Otherwise,
Yep. Yep.
we're to expand. And so that's really the aspect of us that needs to be front and center in order to keep us on path to realizing our potential here. And in order to do that, we need to cultivate a deeper trust in that guidance that we receive and in taking action on that guidance. I said earlier when I was sharing this story, um, I packed up my car and drove out west, right? Like, I didn't know how my whole life was going to unfold, but what I knew in every cell of my being was that I couldn't be where I was anymore. And a lot of
Mm,
really amazing things unfolded from that one decision. I want to share just briefly another example of trusting, right? Is, before everything happened, this story that I just shared with you, I used to pray every day, like every single day for like 3 or 4 years, um, that I would find the right partner, right? And then
mm,
when I started feeling unfulfilled in my work, I started adding to that daily prayer, and to also find the perfect job, like to find something where I was fulfilled again. And what
right.
happened? This path that I ended up finding, but I only found it because I made that decision to take a leap of faith. And I found my husband after I moved, which, by the way, we dated in high school and hadn't talked for like over 25 years, and we reconnected, right?
That's so
Look
awesome.
look at how those prayers were answered. And they were
Yeah.
answered in a way that I could never have possibly imagined at the time.
Yeah. 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 That's
So
beautiful.
trust, yes.
How does trust continue to empower you?
I really love experiencing is more of a better word to describe it, the magic that unfolds whenever
Mm,
we decide to trust,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that really brings forward a sense of empowerment. And that sense of empowerment, the essence of that is the truth of who we really are. We're these amazing divine creator beings, right? Our traditional society tells us, stay at the same job, learn the same things, live the same way, and all of that. And it's quite honestly directly the opposite,
Yeah. I
right?
definitely agree with you. Being a Gen Xer myself, I definitely agree with you that that was how we were taught, programmed, and led to believe. I do think that the younger generation today, they don't have that same box because the world isn't the same, right? Like, I
Yeah,
mean, I have young adult children. They will never stay in a job 30, 40 years like people in my generation do. The company people in my company, have been there 40 years.
yeah,
My Our younger generation will never have that. So it is definitely a different they have a different set of rules than what we grew up. So I find that's fascinating just to look at the differences and yeah,
yeah.
it's
Yeah,
wild.
that aspect absolutely is different. There are also aspects that I would say that are some toxic aspects, right? That are probably more so since our generation too, like with the younger generations, like the pressures of social
Yes.
media and
Yeah.
what school environments are like these days. And I would say that is it seemed a lot simpler in our time.
Very much.
you
I
know.
agree.
Um,
Yes, absolutely
yeah.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is interesting to look at the different dynamics, but yeah, absolutely. I agree with what you were saying too. The younger generations, they will not stay at a job,
Yeah, it's just
that
such a
long.
different world for them. And yeah, it's just
They
fascinating. And
have
as
their
we're
own
moving,
element, right? Like their own challenges
yeah,
of
yeah.
around breaking free from conformist practices.
Yes. Yeah, yes. Yes. I was blessed with a couple of them. A couple children were my mirrors, and man,
Yeah.
they have such a heart of injustice that I don't have, or I don't necessarily see it in in my colored glasses, right? Because based on how I was raised. So even just to sit and listen to them talk about the things that are happening in the world and the injustice that they're seeing and experiencing from in their words, like I just sometimes just sit in awe, like, wow, wow.
Yeah.
Can learn so much if we sit and listen. But I want to go into our next question.
Okay.
So, in terms of mind, body, soul mastery, the whole premise of this podcast, right? Souls here having a human experience. What's unique to our soul that we've never experienced before or that we remember, quote unquote, is like this the feelings, this human experience, this journey, all those lessons that we're here to learn. As we move on the spiritual journey, this awakening, we get the mind, body, and the soul pieces and how they're meant to work together. But we don't know that in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So usually one is harder as we're learning, one is harder to master. Get in line with, get aligned with, or get on board. Which one for you was more difficult?
I love this question. Um, I actually feel like the answer to this question is going to be different for someone based on their unique path. For me, I
Absolutely.
I would say my mind first, because of all the beliefs and limiting beliefs, right, around um what's possible and breaking free,
Mm.
liberating
Hmm.
myself from that societal conditioning. I do want to add to that though and say the mind came first, and what came shortly after that was also the body, because we hold we're these amazing multidimensional beings, right? And we hold a lot the energy of those limiting beliefs, right,
Yep.
in
Yep.
our body. So we hold
Yep.
trauma in our body, we hold ancestral wounds in our body, we hold subconscious stuff from other lifetimes in our
Yep.
body. So I would say the mind was kind of scratching the surface, right? And it's obviously still a thing, but I don't, the body runs like it's neck and neck, because we store a lot of stuff in our physical body. Like I um teach clients, I speak often about the importance of not just, those daily practices as far as your energetic hygiene, but being cognizant of your moment to moment throughout your day, because
Yeah.
whenever you're feeling triggered or having anger or experiencing something, really training yourself to step into an observer role in real time, right? No matter
Yes.
what you're doing, and
Yeah.
process that, acknowledge it, process it, understand why it's coming forward, and then using the protocols that you use, right,
Yep.
to
Yep.
clear that. It's so important. So yeah, mind, but yeah, I don't know, mind and
Yeah.
body.
No. And I love listening to everyone's answer. I mean, I don't know if there's a right or wrong, but I love listening to everyone's
Yeah.
answer because, it is different for everyone. I want to go back to you said something in the beginning before you had the catalyst of your mom in the hospital. You kind of were having your spiritual awakening kind of started. What were some of the first things that you did or people that you found that helped you develop those intuitive gifts or help you heal or helped start that expansion?
Yeah, so I'd always felt naturally drawn to esoteric concepts, you
Hmm.
know. Um, but as far as, so I became self-taught, for example, with meditation. And to this day, meditation, I mean, I teach it to clients and I talk about it a lot. Meditation is the number one gateway, right, to
Hmm. Yep.
opening up to the truth of who we are, right, to
Yep.
ourselves. And guided meditations are fun, and I do those. And I even have an amazing free journey that I can talk about if you want me to share that later. But the best way is to learn how to meditate in silence without any sound, right? Just really being totally present to your body, to what, not just how your body feels, but what are the sounds of your body, right? You can really tune
Mm-hmm.
into not just your breath, but what does it sound like to have your blood flowing? You know,
Mm.
what does consciousness sound like? Really going deep within yourself to tune in. So that was the first thing that I really pursued, taking my own initiative, right? I just felt guided to do that. Like I said, I've always been very intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Mm-hmm.
before I would say I had that initial catalyst. But one of a couple of the earlier teachers, I would say, that I followed, one was Doreen Virtue. Uh, do you know who she is?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Well, it's a very interesting story for another day, but she was a spiritual teacher and actually very uh well known in the personal development industry. And then she had an interesting experience where she walked away from her work and did kind of an about face. So that was interesting. But she was a spiritual teacher and had a lot of like angel oracle cards,
Okay. Yep.
tarot cards and stuff like that. So as part of my journey of opening up to myself, I used to love to work with oracle cards and tarot cards. And so I became educated, invested in courses and certifications and all of
Yeah. Yeah.
another early teacher that I followed that still teaches today is Sonia Choquette. She really specializes in working with people to get tuned into their intuition and to get tuned into their guides. Um,
Mm.
and it's interesting because so a couple of other people that are coming up right now too that I feel like I need to mention, they've both transitioned, but their names were Sanaya Roman and Dwayne Packer. They were both channels for some beings that are named Oren and
Mm-hmm.
Dubin, and actually they had a whole light body practitioner training program that I studied, and also it was really them and their teachings that turned me on to deepening into my channeling ability.
So you went deep right from the start,
Oh
is
yeah.
what I'm
Yes,
hearing.
that's my nature. I'm like that with myself. I'm like that with clients. I'm like, okay, we're doing this. We're just like you said at the beginning of your podcast, you
We
just
just
know
go deep. Yep.
there's
Yep.
no point in beating around the bush. It's just like let's
Yep.
let's just do it. But those were some of the earlier teachers, and then I've also trained in Reiki, and I've studied and teach. I also teach the Akashic records. And I mean, I've even moved beyond all of that into bringing forward more of my own higher frequency, unique
Yep. Yep.
healing technologies. So
Yep. Yep. Wow. Fascinating.
yeah,
Fascinating.
there's always more, right?
There is.
Yeah.
It's like limitless if we
Yes,
choose
it
to
really
lean
is.
in. If we
Yes.
choose to lean in. Yep.
Yeah. And
Yep.
I just think it's pretty cool.
Yes. No,
Yeah.
I'm completely with you. Completely with you. I'm just kind of like been nodding my head over here and like, yep, yep, yep.
You're like,
Totally feeling it. Yeah. So bring us back, ground us a little bit, because not everyone is maybe on that path or has
yeah,
gone that deep. And so what are some of the things, but there might be people who resonate on your story in that, you know what, I just, I knew this job wasn't like my end all be all, and it's time I had to make a change. Like
yeah,
there might be people listening who feel that, and who are at that place, right? Like I know there's something more, but I don't know what, right? What do
Yeah.
you do now when life gets messy? Because life continues to happen. Yes, you've been on this journey for 15 years. Life continues to happen. That fear comes up, that anxiety comes up over different things. How do you help yourself through it now?
I'm going to share some universal advice. Okay. So, this, whether you are in a job that you're unhappy in, or you have your own business and you're feeling called to that next evolution of you,
Yep.
right? Whether you've been on your spiritual journey and you're very mission driven and you're feeling called to that next evolution, whoever you are and whatever you're doing and whatever place you're in your life, this universe, this advice I'm about to share is going to apply to you. Whether you feel like you're in the beginning stages of this journey or even you consider yourself to be more advanced on the path, right? The number one thing is you have to establish a way to navigate your life no matter what season you're in and no matter what problem you're having. Okay. And when it comes to problems, a game changer is when you can learn to reframe something from a problem to solve to a skill to attain.
Mm, mm,
Okay. That's a game changer.
yeah.
Now, that was actually above and beyond what I was planning to share. So now I'll get into say, the next thing is, right, is get really acutely tuned in to the difference between your intuitive voice and your ego mind's, your human mind's voice, right? So get really super tuned in to the difference in those voices. It's a lot like working a muscle, okay? But very simply, in the simplest context, the ego mind, your human mind, is always going to be the part of you that questions, that challenge, that hesitates, that has the fear-based
The
negative,
fear or doubt. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And your intuition, your intuitive voice is always going to be guiding you toward expansion. It's often going to come through in a neutral tone, right? So
Hmm.
it's not gonna, be super emotional or like overly across the spectrum. It's just going to always give you guidance that guides you toward your expansion. It's often going to come through in a subtle way. And the way that our intuition speaks to us is different because we're different, right? So
Hmm.
you may physically feel some kind of validation. You may just know something and not know how you know it. You may see something, or you may even hear something or smell something, right? So get tuned into what are the ways that that guidance comes through for you.
Hmm.
And then the next part of that, right? Getting tuned into the guidance, then it's the trust that we were talking about earlier, trusting yourself to take action. That's where a lot of people get stopped up, and it's because of that societal conditioning, right? It's because of that fear. And we're also programmed to believe that we have to be perfect or be in a certain space before we can take action to do the thing that we're being called to do. And that's not true
Yeah.
either. Um,
Right.
being fearless isn't about being without fear. It's about acknowledging how you're feeling and making a conscious decision to stay in your power and
Yeah.
and through that
Yeah.
because that's really the only way, okay? And then the next thing I want to share is get really clear in your sense of self. Like, who are you? What are your values, right?
Hmm.
What would you fall on the sword for? What are you most passionate about? What really matters to you, you know? And live embodied in that. Like I was
Yeah.
saying, I think I said earlier in our conversation, being grounded in your truth, living embodied in your truth, it's not a belief, it's a knowing. So if someone, no matter where they're at on their journey, were to take all the advice I just shared in the last literally the last probably 5 minutes of our conversation, your entire life and every aspect of your life would shift. You can use
Absolutely.
the wisdom that I've shared and navigate any struggle, any
Mm-hmm.
season of your life,
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I just have two things to add. One thing I'd add is the choosing to lean in to the struggle, the problem. You know, when you said reform from a problem to solve to a skill to learn, the
Yeah.
more you can lean into that reframe and
Yes.
follow whatever comes forward, like that, that is like an accelerant to stepping
Yes.
into your power and to stepping into, you know, your awakening and your ascension.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're saying that, what comes forward to add to that, right, is uh something else I actually talk about a lot too, are cultivating both the qualities of curiosity and humility, which is connected
Hmm.
to what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So, like you said, leaning in, being curious, and humility is so important. It's being humble and understanding that there's so much we don't know. There's so much
Yes.
to learn. And I mean, with all the examples that I've even just shared in our conversation about what happens, right? When
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
that willingness, as you said, to lean in and to trust the way that things can unfold that you could never possibly imagine.
Hmm. Absolutely. The other thing I wanted to just say when you were talking about the ego mind, you know, like that fear-based or that doubt-based, when I am with my guides and their knowing comes through or their words come through, it is with such a tone of confidence that I know without a shadow of a doubt that it is them. That because there's no way that would be my mind. That
Yeah.
confident
Mhm.
statement would not be my mind. So it's those kind of subtle little things. The more you practice, the more you listen, the more you tune in. It's those little subtle things that you will begin to glean about between your ego mind, your mind, and versus the higher self or your guides or whoever. And that is, I lost my train of thought. That's how you're going to gain trust with what you're knowing or hearing or seeing, whatever you're clairvoyant. That's how you're going to begin to trust what's coming in because you recognize that could not be my voice or that could not
Absolutely.
be even something I said to myself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as I know we were talking earlier too, it's like working a muscle, right? It takes
Yes.
practice. And
Yeah.
And for those who are listening, if you're just kind of starting off with tuning into that aspect of yourself deeper, I advise people to practice connecting with their highest self, with their own intuition first.
Mhm.
And when they feel more comfortable with that, then you can
Yeah.
start, working with other guides and whatnot. Uh, but yeah, it is so much like working a muscle, and the more you do it, the more confident you feel about it. And we've talked about trust, right? Like
Yeah.
I, teach other people this stuff, and that's the number one thing. It goes back to trust, but the number one thing that all of my students say is, well, I feel like I'm making this up. It's so common.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and I tell them, I stop before they go into their story, I stop them in their tracks and say, you don't need to tell me your story, and it's not because I don't want to hear you. It's because no matter what you're going to tell me, I'm telling you, you're not making it up. Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing happens at random. There's a reason why you received the information that you received. So just
Yeah.
trust what you
Yeah.
received and move forward from that
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. Jennifer, God, this has been a simply fascinating conversation. So good. So good. But our time is coming to a close. So, well, last question. With all that we've talked about, with all the tangents that we've been on, what would be the one thing you'd like our listeners to take away from this conversation?
Yeah. Start trusting yourself more, loving
Mm,
yourself more, also meeting yourself where you are now,
mm,
right?
mm.
With
Yes.
love, with compassion
Grace. Yeah.
and grace, and moving forward from that space.
In all ways.
Yes.
In all ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, love it. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing, having this conversation with me. It's been just the best.
Yeah, I likewise, ditto. I enjoyed myself. I loved connecting. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.